What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. And it's been a while, man, but today we got a Bob Dylan reaction, another side of Bob Dylan, brought to us by our friend and longtime patron and supporter of the channel and Dylan superfan, Osmond. Appreciate it, Osmond. Somehow I've never listened to this album. Guys, we probably got more Dylan up on the channel than anybody except for the Beatles, so I'll put the playlist at the end of this video and you can check out pretty much whatever you want because there's a lot of stuff there, but this one wasn't. So quick facts on this album: fourth studio album released on August 8th, 1964 by Columbia. 43 in the US, 8 in the UK. Some story behind this. So the quick facts are not going to be quite so quick, but just bear with me. The album deviates from the more socially conscious style which Dylan had developed with his previous LP, The Times. They Are a Change. It's so fantastic. The change prompted criticism from some influential figures in the folk community. Sing Out editor Erwin Silber complained that Dylan had somehow lost touch with people and was caught up in the paraphernalia of fame. I mean, Dylan really took a lot of heat back in the day. Throughout 1963, Dylan worked on a novel and a play. A number of publishers were interested in signing Dylan to a contract, and at one point, City Lights, a small but prestigious publishing company that specialized in poetry, was strongly considered. However, as Dylan worked on his book at a casual pace, his manager Albert Grossman decided to make a deal with a major publisher. Macmillan's senior editor, Bob Markle, said, "We gave Dylan an advance for an untitled book of writings. The publisher was taking a risk on a young, untested potential phenomenon." When Markle met with Dylan for the first time, there was no book at the time. The material at that point was hazy, sketchy. The poetry editor called it inaccessible. The symbolism was not easily understood, but on the other hand, it was earthy, filled with obscure but marvelous imagery. I felt it had a lot of value and was very different from Dylan's output till then, but it was not a book. It would be years before Dylan finished this book, but the free-form poetry experiments that came from it eventually influenced his songwriting. The most notable example came in a 6-line coda to a poem responding to President John F. Kennedy's assassination, which took place, of course, on November 22nd, 1963. This is what Dylan wrote. "The colors of Friday were dull, as cathedral bells were gently burning, striking for the gentle, striking for the kind, striking for the crippled ones, and striking for the blind." It's pretty good. This refrain would soon appear in a very important composition, Chimes of Freedom, as biographer Clinton Halen writes. With this sad refrain, Dylan would pass from topical troubadour to poet of the road. In February 64, Dylan embarked on a 20-day trip across the U.S., riding in a station wagon with a few friends, Paul Clayton, Victor Maymudis, and Pete Carmen. Dylan began the trip in New York, taking numerous detours through many states before ending the trip in California. I'll tell you what, if you're going in a station wagon from New York to California with 4 dudes, that's quite the trip. According to Halen, the primary motivation for this trip was to find enough inspiration to step beyond the folk song form, if not in the bars or from the minors, then by peering deep into himself. Dylan spent much time in the back of the station wagon working on songs and possibly poetry on a typewriter in the back of the station wagon. Can you imagine? It was during this trip that Dylan composed Chimes of Freedom. Mr. Tambourine Man and was also composed during this trip. In January, while the Beatles were in France, George Harrison bought the French release of the freewheeling Bob Dylan titled En Roue Libre. Not good at French, guys. You already figured that out. Which they played repeatedly, impressed by the lyrics and just the attitude. As the Beatles began to influence Dylan and vice versa, Dylan's personal life was undergoing a number of significant changes. When he returned to New York in March, he rented an electric guitar. He continued his romance with folk singer, the great Joan Baez, though their stage appearances together began to dwindle. Dylan's girlfriend, Susie Rotello, apparently had had enough of the affair. Soon after Dylan returned to New York, the two had an argument. At the time, Susie was staying with her sister Carla, and when Carla intervened, Dylan began screaming at Carla. Carla ordered Dylan to leave, but he refused to go. Carla pushed Dylan, he pushed her back. The two of them were soon practically fighting. Friends were called, and Dylan had to be forcibly removed, effectively ending his relationship with Susie. In a 1966 interview, Dylan admitted that after the relationship ended, quote, "I got very, very strung out for a while. I mean, really very strung out." One account of Dylan's first experience with psychedelics places it in April of 64. Producer Paul Rothschild, of Doors fame, said he was present when Dylan took his first hit of LSD. By February 64, Dylan was already telling his friends that Rimbaud's where it's at. That's the kind of stuff that means something. That's the kind of writing I'm going to do. A 19th century French poet, Rimbaud, Dylan's early interpretation with hallucinogens, and has often been connected with the dramatic development his songwriting would soon take. But Dylan himself has denied any connection. Dylan later left for Europe, completing a few performances in England before traveling to Paris, where he was introduced to a German model. Christina Pafkin, who went by the name of Nico. Everything's connected in the 60s, boys and girls. After treating Dylan to a meal at her flat, Nico accompanied Dylan across Europe, a trip that passed through Germany before ending in a small village outside of Athens, Greece. Dylan stayed there for more than a week, finishing many of the songs that would appear on this album. He also completed another song called I'll Keep It With Mine, which according to Nico was about me and my little baby. Dylan gave the song to Nico, who would eventually record it for her own album, a very good album by the way, Chelsea Girl, released in 1967. With Dylan's commercial profile on the rise, Columbia was now urging him to release a steady stream of recordings, as they did with everybody back then. Upon his return to New York, studio time was quickly scheduled with Tom Wilson back as producer. The first and only recording session, yes, I did say it, only, was held on June 9th at Columbia's Studio A in New York. According to Hyland, while polishing off a couple of bottles, Dylan recorded 14 original compositions that night, 11 of which were chosen for the final album. The 3 that were ultimately rejected were Denise, Mr. Tambourine Man, and Mama, You've Been on My Mind. Nate Hentoff's article on Dylan for The New Yorker, published in late October of '64, includes remarkable descriptions of this June 9th recording session. Hentoff describes in considerable detail the atmosphere in the CBS recording studio and Dylan's own asides and banter with his friends in the studio, while with the session's producers and Hentoff himself. By the time Dylan recorded what was ultimately the master take of My Back Pages, it was 1:30 in the morning. Master takes were selected, and after some minor editing, a final album was soon sequenced. As Dylan told Hentoff in that New York article, there aren't any finger-pointing songs on another side of Bob Dylan, which is a significant step in a new direction. 4 songs from this were eventually recorded by the Byrds: Chimes of Freedom, My Back Pages, Spanish Harlem Incident, and All I Really Want to Do. In addition, they were introduced to their breakthrough hit single, of course, Mr. Tambourine Man, through a copy of Dylan's unreleased recording from this session. All received their share of critical acclaim. I've always wondered how they got Mr. Tambourine Man so early. Now I know, since it wasn't on this album and they had it out before Dylan. Critical acclaim on this album was not good. It's because it was so much different. I already referenced some of the backlash. However, AllMusic's 5 out of 5, Encyclopedia of Popular Music 4 out of 5, and the Rolling Stone Album Guide 4.5 out of 5. But those last 2 are retrospective reviews. All tracks, as always, are written by Dylan. The music will not be in the video. It would be blocked instantly on YouTube. Dylan's publishers do that. It's not Bob himself. So there's a Vimeo link below if you want to listen to the music. If you just want to know what I think of them, hang around and you will find out. We're going to start this off with All I Really Want to Do. There were hit cover versions of this by the Byrds and by Cher. He recorded it in one take. Like other songs on the album, is inspired by his breakup with Susie Rotello. It is essentially a list of things, physical and psychological, that Dylan does not want to do or be to the listener. Perhaps a woman, or perhaps the audience as a whole. Thanks again, Osmond. Really appreciate it. All I Really Want to Do. A good way to start the album. It took me through the first verse to kind of get used to Bob and the way he's sounding here. And I mean, I think this whole album's just going to be Bob, obviously, on his acoustic and his harmonica and just busting stuff out. And 6 verses, 4 lines, the final 2 lines of each verse in the same way. It's the songwriting technique. All I really want to do, I'm not going to do the do. I did it, and I'm sorry about that. Is baby, be friends with you. So he just says 4 different lines, busts out that. He starts out, I ain't looking to compete with you, beat or cheat or mistreat you, simplify you, classify you, deny, defy, or crucify you. And verse 2, so no, I ain't looking to fight with you, frighten you or uptighten you, drag you down or drain you down, chain you down or bring you down. We go all the way to the last verse. It says, I don't want to fake you out, take or shake or forsake you out. I ain't looking for you to feel like me, see like me, or be like me. And when he does the be like me, he starts laughing, right? Which is kind of cool that they left it in there, and then he finishes out with the all I really want to do is baby, be friends with you. You kind of hear him laughing a little bit through the rest of that those 2 lines as well. So, really well written song, obviously, and he kind of covered just about everything you could think of. That if someone thought you had ulterior motives, this kind of lets them know that you don't if they believe what you're saying. Now we go to Black Crow Blues. It's the first song released in which he plays the piano. Dylan has never performed it live. So see, I just said it's going to be acoustic and harmonica, but it's just Bob at least. But yeah, never performed it live, which is rare because Bob's done quite a few live shows in his life, eh? Black Crow Blues. I think this would have fit on Bringing It All Back Home, the next album that he'll record, of course, the first of the trilogy that was recorded in 14 months. It, in my opinion, is the greatest 3-album run of all time, but I digress. This song I woke in the morning wondering, weary and worn out. I woke in the morning wondering, weary and worn out, wishing my long lost lover would walk to me and talk to me, tell me what it's all about. And you just get the piano, the harmonica, and a nice cadence and flow to this song. At the very end, of verse 4, I really like. Sometimes I'm thinking I'm too high to fall. Sometimes I'm thinking I'm much too high to fall. Other times I'm thinking I'm so low, I don't know if I can come up at all. So I thought that was pretty cool. The things he's going through. Yeah, man, I'm great. I'm great. Oh, no, I'm not at all. Verse 5, we kind of get into the black crows. Find black crows in the meadow, sleeping across a broad highway. Black crows in the meadow across a broad highway. Though it's funny, honey, I'm out of touch. Don't feel much like a scarecrow today, so he's not going to scare those black crows away. So I did enjoy that one. Now we're going to go to Spanish Harlem Incident. It's been described as a gorgeous vignette by critics and been praised for its multi-layered poetic dimensions. It's only 225, by the way. When Dylan himself has been questioned about the song's subject matter, he has confessed he has no idea. It was covered by the Byrds on their 1965 album, Mr. Tambourine Man, and had first been performed by the band during their pre-fame residency in West Hollywood. So that's the history of the Byrds, because a lot of these songs people know more from the Byrds or others than they do from Bob. Great songwriting, obviously. Gypsy Gals, we started with the Gypsy, and he kind of intertwines those themes throughout. The hands of Harlem cannot hold you to its heat. Your temperature is too hot for taming. Your flaming feet are burning up the street. I'm homeless, come and take me to the reach of your rattling drums. Let me know, babe, all about my fortune down along my restless palms. So the Gypsy reading the poems. And you just get an idea of the illustrative and descriptive songwriting here. There's only 3 verses. Verse 3, I've been wondering all about me ever since I seen you there. On the cliffs of your wildcat charms I'm riding. I know I'm around you, but I don't know where. You have slayed me, you have made me. I got to laugh halfways off my heels. I got to know, babe, yeah, will you surround me so I can know if I'm really real? So a great way to end that song off. So we go from the shortest song on here to the second longest song on here, the epic Chimes of Freedom. This song depicts the thoughts and feelings of the singer and his companion as they shelter from a lightning storm under a doorway after sunset. The singer expresses his solidarity with the downtrodden and oppressed, believing that the thunder is tolling in sympathy for them. Initially, critics describe the song as showing the influence of the symbolic poetry, as I said earlier, of Arthur Rimbaud, but more, and it might be Rimbaud, that's probably what it is, and I'm saying it wrong. So just pretend like I didn't say it that way earlier on. So don't leave me a comment, it's Rimbaud, because I got it now. But more recent biographers of Dylan have linked the origins of the song to the verses the songwriter had written as a response to the assassination of JFK. So those lines I gave you earlier. Although Dylan denies this, some commentators and Dylan biographers have assessed this song as one of his most important and significant compositions. And critic Paul Williams has described it as Dylan's Sermon on the Mount. It's been covered many times by different artists, including the Byrds, of course, but also Jefferson Starship, Bruce Springsteen, and U2. In his memoir, The Mayor of McDougal Street, Dave Van Ronk gave his account of the song's origins. Bob Dylan heard me fooling around with one of my grandmother's favorites, the Chimes of Trinity, a sentimental ballad about Trinity Church. It went something like, tolling for the outcast, tolling for the gay, tolling for the something something, long since passed away, as we whiled away the hours down on old Broadway and we listened to the chimes of Trinity. He made me sing it for him a few times until he had the gist of it, then reworked it into Chimes of Freedom. Her version was better. Wow. All right. Dave giving a little shade there. Let's check it out. Wow. Now I'm just going to tell you, man, like this song, it has 6 verses, no chorus, 6 verses. It has more words in it and more meaningful words than most artists' entire albums. I'm not even joking, man. If there was a song you wanted to point to, you could pick this one. I got several in mind. You could pick this one if someone didn't understand Dylan. And they could just listen to this song while they had the lyrics up to read them. Now, they might not get it because I don't totally get this song. But they would understand his brilliance. Even if they didn't like him, they would understand that, man, this guy is at a different level. Or as the kids say nowadays, he's built different. I'm not even going to try to break down all these lyrics for you. He's with this girl and they're running in to get shelter. But there's also some war allusions in here. And for the downtrodden and everybody else. I mean, I'm not even going to try to break it down. I like a line in verse 5, condemned to drift or else be kept from drifting is a great line, right? Just that one line. Condemned to drift, so you never have a home and so you're just always going around, or to be kept from drifting, so you're locked into a place, whether it's literal or metaphorically, and you don't get out and get your freedom and explore things. This that one line tells you. And then verse 6, toiling for the aching whose wounds cannot be nursed, for the countless confused, accused, misused, strung out ones, and worse, and for every hung up person in the whole wide universe. And we gazed upon the chimes of freedom flashing. So good. Like I said, I could spend an hour literally breaking this thing down line by line. I'm not going to do that to you, but it's just fantastic. And you got to bring up the lyrics if you're listening along with me. You got to check out the lyrics as you're doing it. I mean, they're so detailed. Yeah, just great. Now we go to I Shall Be Free, number 10. One of the things I read said a sequel to I Shall Be Free from the freewheeling Bob Dylan. Just like in the first one, Bob lets himself go through frantic and free-flow reflections on pop culture, politics, and women, all done with a satirical and ironic tone. All right, let's do it. So you go from Chimes of Freedom to I Shall Be Free, number 10, and shows the two different sides of Dylan, right? The brilliance of Dylan. This is satirical. I mean, there's, 11 verses in this thing? And some of them are really witty, and some of them are witty and just funny, man. I like verse 1. I'm just average, common, too. I'm just like him and the same as you. I'm everybody's brother and son. Ain't different than anyone. Ain't no use to talk to me. It's just the same as talking to you. In other words, it's because I'm famous, man. It's like not any big deal to talk to me. And then verse 2 just made me laugh, man. I was shadowboxing early in the day. I figured I was ready for Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali, if you don't know. I said, fee, fi, fo, fum, Cassius Clay. Here I come. And then he counts off some numbers and says all this stuff. You better run and make your face look just like mine. Going to knock him clean out of his spleen. And then talks a little bit about Russia. What about being liberal? Throws a Barry Goldwater, who ran for president in '64, in there. Sat with high-heeled sneakers on, waiting to play tennis in the noonday sun. I got a woman, verse 7, I got a woman, she's so mean, she sticks my boots in the washing machine, sticks me with buckshot when I'm nude, puts bubblegum in my food. She calls me funny, wants my money, calls me honey. Talks about his friends who really aren't his friends. And I like verse 11. Now you're probably wondering by now just what this song is all about. Well, what's probably got you baffled more is what this thing here is for. And he plays a little riff of the song. It's nothing. He starts laughing. It's something I learned over in England. So I really did enjoy that song, man. It made me laugh. And lots of lyrics, man. Lots of lyrics. We're going to finish out the A side or side 1, whichever you prefer, with To Ramona, which is a folk waltz with the melody inspired by traditional Mexican corrido folk music, and also bears a similarity to Rex Griffin's 1937 song, The Last Letter. The song's lyrics make allusions to folk singer Joan Baez, who he's dating at the time. With whom Dylan was involved in a personal relationship at the time of his composition and subsequent release. So let's finish out side 1. To Ramona, and it's to Joan Baez, most likely. There's just some great writing in here, too. People, and I talk about at the beginning, people blasting, getting away from his political stuff and making statements. I mean, there's statements all over most of these songs, man. So, I mean, I don't know what people were getting at the time, but I wasn't living in the moment, So maybe I don't know. I don't get why they so maligned him, because tons of this stuff, first he's talking about her. Ramona, come closer, shut softly your watery eyes. The pangs of your sadness will pass as your senses will rise. Oh, the flowers of the city, though breath-like, get death-like at times. And there's no use in trying to deal with the dying, though I cannot explain that in lines. So he's most likely talking about wars right there. So there's political there. And then he's talking about her in verse 2. Verse 3, I can see that your head has been twisted and fed. So he's talking about political stuff here with the worthless foam from the mouth. I can tell you are torn between staying and returning back to the South. You've been fooled into thinking that the finishing end is at hand, yet there's no one to beat you, no one to defeat you, except the thoughts of yourself feeling bad. I mean, I'm talking, like I already said, like Dylan's writing is deep. And it just ends with, I'd forever talk to you, but soon my words would turn into a meaningless ring. Like, so the more you hear a message repeated over and over, the more you become numb to it, right? So we got to choose our words wisely. For deep in my heart, I know there's no help I can bring. Everything passes, everything changes. Just do what you think you should do. And someday, maybe, who knows, baby, I'll come and be crying to you. The shoe will be on the other proverbial foot, so to speak. So really good way to finish out the first side. Now we're going to go over side 2 with a very interesting title, Motorcycle Nightmare. The title and lyrics reference Hitchcock's thriller Psycho, released in 1960. The song is a parody which also draws on traveling salesman jokes where the main character shows up at a farmhouse looking for a place to spend the night, only to be lured by the temptations of the farmer's daughter. Dylan weds the basic plots of the film and joke to create a humorous tale with a political point. Historian Sean Willents had suggested that Motorcycle Nightmare can be heard as a first draft of Dylan's song Bob Dylan's 115th Dream, which is fantastic, which he recorded 7 months later in January 65. He argues that 115th Dream shares an identical melody with Motorcycle Nightmare, and both songs revolve around a hapless traveling salesman who is constantly getting in and out of jams. Well, I'm very familiar with the 115th Dream, so I'll see if there's that similarity there. Motorcycle Nightmare, what a freaking story, man. I mean, just what a story. So it starts out, he pounded on a farmhouse looking for a place to stay. He was tired, and the guy comes out, and he immediately looked at me and stuck a gun into my guts. And then I fell down on my bended knees saying, "I dig farmers, don't shoot me, please." He cocked the rifle, asked if he was the salesman he heard about. He said, no, I'm a doctor, and it's true. I'm a clean-cut kid, and I've been to college too. Then in come his daughter, whose name was Rita. She looked like she stepped out of a Dolce Vita, so another movie shout out. I immediately tried to cool with his dad. And so verse 4, then we go into, he told him, "I drove 1,000 miles today. So, well, I got a place for you to sleep under the stove, but just one condition. You can go to sleep right now, that you don't touch my daughter, and in the morning milk the cows," which is 2 conditions, but I wouldn't argue with the guy. So he was sleeping like a rat. Well, when I heard something jerking, there stood Rita looking just like Tony Perkins. So there's your Psycho, because Tony Perkins was the lead role. So would you like to take a shower, which is the famous scene in Psycho? I'll show you up to the door. I said, "Oh, no, I've been through this movie before." I knew I had to split, but I did not know how. When she said, "Would you like to take that shower now?" Well, I couldn't leave unless the old man chased me out, because I'd already promised that I'd milk his cows. This guy's not going to break his promise. I had to say something to strike him very weird, so I yelled out, "I like Fidel Castro and his beard." And so the dude came charging down. "What's that I heard you say?" I said, "I like Fidel Castro. I think you heard me right." As I ducked, as he swung at me with all his might. As his fist hit the icebox, he said he's going to kill me if you don't get out the door in 2 seconds flat, "you unpatriotic, rotten Dr. Commie." So Bob crashes through the plate glass window, landed fully blasted in the garden flowers. He ran down the road. "Well, I don't figure I'll be back there for a spell, even though Rita moved away and got a job in a motel. He still waits for me constant on the sly. He wants to turn me into the FBI. Me, I romp and stomp, and thankful as I romp. Without freedom of speech, I might be in the swamp." If he couldn't have yelled that out, this guy would have killed him if he would have found him with his daughter. But a lot of funny stuff in here, man. It's such a well-written song. Fidel Castro, back then communism was the huge deal. We'd already had a ton of stuff, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs, all this stuff with Cuba. So they would have been enemy number one along with Russia, but they were probably enemy number one at the time of writing this in 1964. So just like I said, just a funny, well-written track. I do want to remind you, he recorded all this in one day, right? The fact that he can remember the words to all these songs is part of his absolute genius. Now we go to My Back Pages. Although he wrote it in 64, did not perform it live until 1988. It's been covered by artists as diverse as Byrds, the Ramones, Steve Earle, and the Hollies. The Byrds version, initially released on their 1967 album Younger Than Yesterday, was also issued as a single in 67 and it proved to be the band's last top 40 hit in the U.S. It's partly based on the traditional folk song Young But Growing and has a mournful melody similar to that of the lonesome death of Hattie Carroll from Dylan's previous album, The Times They Are A-Changin'. In the lyrics, Dylan criticizes himself for having been certain that he knew everything and apologizes for his previous political preaching, noting that he has become his own enemy in the instant that I preach. Dylan questions whether one can really distinguish between right and wrong and even questions the desirability of the principle of equality. The lyrics also signaled his disillusionment with the 1960s protest movement and his intention to abandon protest songwriting. It effectively analogizes the protest movement to the establishment it is trying to overturn. So I can see how this song brought him some heat. In an interview with the Sheffield University paper in May of 65, Bob explained the change that had occurred in his songwriting over the previous 12 months, noting, quote, "The big difference is that songs I was writing last year, they were what I call one-dimensional songs. But my new songs I'm trying to make more three-dimensional. There's more symbolism. They're written on more than one level." In late 65, Bob commented on the writing of this song specifically during an interview with the Toronto Star. He said, quote, "I was in my New York phase then, or at least I was just coming out of it. I was still keeping the things that are really, really real out of my songs for fear they'd be misunderstood. Now I don't care if they are." Wow, My Back Pages. This song is fantastic. I have heard this song before. I did a Birds Top 10. Spoiler alert, it made it. But there's so much in this song. I know I'm a broken record on this album, but he really is. This could be a theme in the United States where I live right now in 2021, where political radicalism has, I almost said the word, has championed everything in so many people's minds. They become so obsessed with their ways right and the other ways wrong, and you can't even speak logically to them. And they read media and watch media that tells them we're the only ones telling you the truth. It becomes this insane brainwashing that becomes their whole identity. I've seen it happen to people close to me. He talks about, he's using the fire motif, crimson flames tied through my ears, rolling high in mighty traps, pounced with fire of flaming roads, using ideas as my maps. We'll meet on the edges soon, said I, proud neath heated brow. So he's saying that, his political idealism or what he believed became his map of life. This is how he lived his life. I like the but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now, because he become bitter and closed-minded, right? This is all he believed in, but now he's realizing that he's got to be more open-minded. Half-racked prejudice leap forth, rip down all hate, I scream. Why is that life is black and white? Spoke from my skull, I dreamed. Romantic facts of musketeers foundation deep somehow. Then he basically talks about girls is why he kind of got into the political idealism at first, and then he starts taking shots at university professors. So I thought that was pretty good. Verse 5, in a soldier's stance, I aim my hand at the mongrel dogs who teach. Another shout out to the professor. Fearing not that I become my enemy in the instant that I preach. My existence led by confusion boats, mutiny from stern to bow. So he's believing he's become part of the machine that he spoke out against, right? He was the one out there saying these political ideas. So just a fantastic and very deep song. He wrote it in 1964. I know many people who should listen to this song in 2021. Wow. Now we go to I Don't Believe You, and then in parentheses, she acts like we never have met. Was done in a single take, and Dylan chuckles to himself as he realizes he has sung the verse beginning, though her skirt it swayed as the guitar played, before the verse beginning, though the night ran swirling and whirling, contrary to the printed lyrics. Dylan biographer Robert Shelton describes it as being about, quote, the intoxication of a night of love followed by the throbbing headache of his partner's emotional abandonment and detachment. At a Halloween concert back in 1964, he introduced it by saying, quote, this is about all the people that say they've never seen you. All right, a little different, a little more driving with the acoustic on there. I liked it. It told a good little story of kind of what I talked about in the beginning, and I can't understand. She let go of my hand and left me here facing the wall. I'd sure like to know why'd she go, but I can't get close to her at all. Though we kissed through the wild, blazing nighttime, she said she would never forget. But now morning's clear. It's like, I ain't here. She acts like we never met. that regret, and she just takes off. And he just kind of delves that out through the rest of the song. 5 verses, well done. I don't really have much to say about it. I'm not going to break down the lyrics a lot, just because I've already done that on a lot of songs, and you heard it, and it's good, man. Now we're going to go to the longest song on the album. It's over 8 minutes long. We got Ballad in Plain D. The song recounts the circumstances surrounding the disintegration of his relationship with Susie Rotolo. In the song, Dylan details the conflicts between himself and Susie's mother, Mary, and her sister, Carla, which I kind of talked about at the start of this. The song relates how tension between Dylan and Susie came to a head in the last week of March 1964 with that violent argument, what I talked about, which Dylan and Carla shouted abuse at each other and kind of became physical. In an interview, Susie sounded a forgiving note about the song. She said, quote, people have asked me how I felt about those songs that were bitter, like Ballad in Plain D, since I inspired some of those too. Yet I never felt hurt by them. I understood what he was doing. It was the end of something, and we both were hurt and bitter. His art was his outlet, his exorcism. It was healthy. That was the way he wrote out his life. The loving songs, the cynical songs, the political songs, they're all part of the way he saw his world and lived his life, period. Dylan, when asked in 1985, so many years later, if he had any regrets about this song, he replied, oh yeah, that one. I look back and say, I must have been a real schmuck to write that. I look back in that particular one and say, of all the songs I've written, maybe I could have left that alone. But I say this all the time, you wrong a songwriter, or they feel wronged. I mean, Joni Mitchell did it a ton too. They're going to write a song about you, man. It's just how it goes. So let's check it out. Ballad in Plain D. What a song. 13 verses. There's everything in here, right? He starts out, I once loved a girl. Her skin, it was bronze. With the innocence of a lamb, she was gentle like a fawn. I courted her proudly, but now she is gone. Gone is the season she's taking. In a young summer's youth, I stole her away from her mother and sister, though close did they stay. Each one of them suffering from the failures of their day. With strings of guilt, they tried hard to guide us. Of the two sisters, I loved the young. With sensitive instincts, she was the creative one. Their constant scapegoat, she was easily undone by the jealousy of others around her. For her parasite sister, this is verse 4. I'm just reading it. I'm not going to read you the whole song, but verse 4 is the most like zinger. For her parasite sister, I had no respect. Bound by her boredom, her pride to protect. Countless visions of the others she'd reflect as a crutch of her scenes in her society. Verse 5, myself for what I did, I cannot be excused. The changes I was going through can't even be used. For the lies that I told her and hoped not to lose, the could-be dream lover of my lifetime. He talks about how he lost her and it's his fault. In verse 8, and so it did happen like it could have been foreseen. The timeless explosion of fantasy's dream. At the peak of the night, the king and the queen tumbled all down into pieces. The tragic figure, her sister did shout, leave her alone, GD, you get out. And in my armor, turning about and nailing her in the ruins of her pettiness. And then talks about how the sister and him were yelling at each other and Susie was caught in the middle. Verse 11, all is gone, admit it, take flight. I gagged in contradiction, tears blinding my sight. My mind, it was mangled, I ran into the night, leaving all of love's ashes behind me. Verse 12, he talks about, I think of her often and hope whoever she's met will be fully aware of how precious she is. And it ends, verse 13, all my friends from the prison, they ask unto me, how good does it feel to be free? So he's talking about friends from his prison, friends of his who are in relationships, like what's it like to be free? And I answer them most mysteriously, are birds free from the chains of the skyway? So he's saying it seems like you're free, just like it seems like a bird's free, but a bird is still captured, right? A bird can't fly outside of Earth. A bird still has a limited area to work in. So he's basically telling, man, be careful what you wish for, because this is not great. I mean, this song is so well written. I don't think it's horribly disrespectful. I mean, there are some zingers, but it also is very cathartic, I'm sure, for him, and very much admits his wrong. Now we're going to finish this off with It Ain't Me, Babe. Single went to 43 in the US, 8 in the UK. Within a year of its release, it was picked up as a single by the Turtles and also by Johnny Cash, who sang it as a duet with his wife, June Carter. Dylan's biographers generally agree that the song owes its inspiration to Susie. He reportedly began writing the song during his visit to Italy in 1963 while searching for her, who was studying there. All right, let's finish this thing off. It Ain't Me, Babe. I mean, in these last two songs, Dylan really does present a high level of like self-realization and self-actualization of like the things that he isn't, that he wishes that he was. I mean, if he wrote this to Susie, and I'm sure he probably did, because that's kind of what the song is all about. Go away from my window, leave at your own speed. I'm not the one you want, babe. I'm not the one you need. And then each verse finishes off with some form of, you say you're looking for someone, and then it has different things. First verse is, who's never weak but always strong, to protect you and defend you whether you are right or wrong. Someone to open each and every door. And it hits the refrain, but it ain't me, babe. No, it ain't me, babe. It ain't me you're looking for. And so he just kind of tells her that throughout the rest of the song. So, I mean, kudos to Bob for having that level of self-realization that he is not the guy. All right, now we're going to get to my favorite tracks. And here's what I'll say about this album before, I'm going to get into the overall grade in a minute here. But look, I really, really like Dylan, and I love his stuff in the 60s. And this is no different, right? So, I mean, as Trey will say, your mileage may vary. For me, I really like this album. And in that, if you like Dylan and you like this time period of Dylan, you're going to like basically all the songs. There's not a song on here I don't like. So I always make notes as I'm going through, because first time I've ever heard this, of each song, of whether it's a fave or honorable mention. There's a lot in here. Honorable mention, Motorcycle Nightmare, and I Shall Be Free, number 10. That is a funny song. My faves, All I Really Want to Do, the opening track, Spanish Harlem Incident, of course, Chimes of Freedom, My Back Pages, and Ballad in Plain D. I mean, you got to shout it out, but I mean, this last song, It Ain't Me, Babe, was great too. So, I mean, I really, really just enjoy the songwriting, and in that, I enjoy Bob. So that's going to take me to overall score. This is not what is about to come, right? Bringing it all back home. Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde are the next three albums. And I said it at the start, I alluded to it. In my opinion, the greatest 3-album run in history, right? And did it all in 14 months. This is a good segue into it. So on this one, I'm going to be at an 8.0. Like I said, if you like Dylan, you're going to like this. And if you're so on Dylan, it's probably not going to resonate with you, but that's okay. But shouldn't have taken all the heat he did then, but I didn't live through it. So thanks, Osmond, for bringing this, man. I really do appreciate it, man. I enjoyed it greatly. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you like to support me in any way, check out the Patreon link below or the patron link on the end screen. I'll also put something from Dylan up there that you might enjoy. Give us a sub if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, I will see you.